So thank you all for coming and for John and the team for hosting this conference. It's going to be a little bit of a chaotic journey for all of us in this room as I talk through a couple of these cool use cases. But before we get into that, let me quickly give you a little bit of background about me. So I come from a very technical background. Like I started when I was like 12, 13. Like the first thing I did was I was like finding broken electric scooters, fixing them, reselling them. Then like when I was 14, I got really into like the Kali Linux and like the Backtrack 3 age of security testing, penetration testing, some of that stuff. And so like it went from there and then all the way down to kind of where I am right now, where um, I'm really hyper focused on, and kind of the role that I play in the organizations I work in is sitting between the business and kind of the technology arm and solving really nasty problems for them. Can we can you switch to, yeah, cool. So what you're seeing here is I have 3 dogs, maybe 25 chickens. If you're looking in the center screen, those are actually the first things I was able to successfully 3D print that I had generated with AI. So they're actually for like the bottom legs of a Harbor Freight like storage cabinet for tools. Below is the motorcycle. I used to ride a lot faster than I do now. I think I've seen a little bit too much and I've slowed down a bit. And then in the right-hand corner, that is another side project where I had decided, hey, people are selling what I see as like they call like embroidery art. And I wanted to say, okay, what about people who just wanted to do that very quickly? They wanted to be able to upload a picture of their dog. They wanted to have that generate into real line art, and then ultimately 3D print that. And so I think what you're kind of getting out of this whole theme is it's been a lot of I like something, try to combine it with something else, and build a solution as part of that. And believe it or not, that actually does relate to the quote that you're seeing here. Um, so believe or say what you want about Microsoft. I think Satya Nadella has made a big difference, and I think one of the strongest characteristics he has is empathy, the ability to like really understand who your user is, to relate to them, not just to sympathize, to really empathize with them, and meet them, solve their specific needs. So, with that, how do we get started with a tool company that I started called Silky Tools? Well, like I told you, I had a bunch of chickens. I like to do some woodworking, and over time I started collecting tools. So that was kind of the starting point. It evolved from there, and why I say evolved from there is I typically need something to get like frustrated with to actually really start a project, and that took form of two components. So the first one was I have a bunch of friends who work in automotive or the various trade industries, and they're complaining about the prices of tools. But at the same time, I had, from a relatively credible source, seen one of the quotes that Home Depot was purchasing like these high torque impact wrenches from TTI, and it was $13. They're selling it for 300. So just seeing that, I was like, okay, that got me a little bit frustrated. And then from there was and so what I was thinking is, hey, maybe I'll just start selling a couple of tools on the side. I'll become like a small scale distributor. I called up Makita and I talked to one of their like region directors, and um, the net of that conversation was you need to purchase things at a price that's above what I could just buy it from like Home Depot on sale for. You have to only price a certain way. You have basically no control over what you do. And so I was like, all right, done with this. I'm going to start doing something myself. So here's Silky Tools, right? So I'm sure everyone will love the icons here. You can thank what was it, Imogen from Google for the lovely art here. But really, the way that this grew and expanded was I started finding these discount deals, and I was trying to basically sell to my friends. And so that's where we're seeing a huge portion of this was word of mouth. And obviously with like starting any new company, especially one that like I am not I'm not a distributor. I don't work in a retail space. And in fact, most of my experience is in like pharma med tech. So completely different. And so I had to relearn and learn a lot of these experiences that people might intuitively understand. So the first one was reliable sourcing. Like I said, a lot of these brands will not sell to you if you are a small scale player. Like they won't even bother taking the call most of the time. And even if they do, they'll impose these restrictions that are, you cannot make money with them. I'll put it that way. And so I was like, okay, I'm not going to beat them on volume. I'm not going to beat them on scale. So I need to do differently. I need to try to solve the problem in a way that other people aren't. And you're starting to see a little bit of that on the right-hand side, but let me quickly walk through a demo. Let me zoom out. All right, so we are in Dallas, so I'll pick that. Anybody else have like a favorite Home Depot store in this area?
Gilman.
Skillman.
Gilman Ohio.
Very good to know. Okay. So wait, so actually there's a fantastic deal. Maybe I'll actually pick this one up before I leave. Anyway, so what you're looking at here is all of the clearance items that are on sale currently at these like major retailers. And I have equivalent versions for most of your big ones. So think about like Lowe's, Ohio Power Tools, Acme Tools. This information is available. It's not particularly easy to get, but you can get it. And so that's what you're looking at here. And there's a whole other set of these where, if you're familiar with the way that Home Depot sells, right, they have a ton of SKUs because they're really combining a bunch of different individual products and combining them into these packages that they sell. Well, they themselves maybe don't understand how these promotions are going to stack and how combining this deal with this other sale at specific times that they're probably selling for 30% of what it normally sells for. But if you're able to like look at this from a little bit more of a holistic picture, you can unpack and understand that. And again, this was all done. Well, the analytics was all done in Foundry. Collection of the data to respect like Foundry's rules was not done in platform. So that's the first part is like how do we solve the sourcing problem? So that's kind of a good thing. We've solved the sourcing problem. The next problem was cash flow and turnover. And like I went to business school and I should intuitively understand this, but there's a very big difference between like understanding cash flow on an academic level and then like understanding the reality of it. And so like I was trying to maintain about like not have inventory for more than 20 days. Like similar retailers are probably about double that, but given the size and the amount of cash I wanted to actually invest, I didn't want to go above 20 days. And that was working out quite well at first. And like this is the first example that kind of told me and taught me that I had to think differently and solve the problem differently than others. And so I had these 4.5 to 5 inch Milwaukee grinders that were selling really well, actually. Like I was maybe selling 7 to 10 of them a week, and I was like, okay, sure, 30 of them, not a big deal. I'll sell that in 3 weeks. What happened is Milwaukee rolled out like a global promo for 45 or 60 days, in which they're basically giving you like a BOGO with an equivalent tool of like this caliper. And so it was about 50% off for the customers, and like demand dried up like that. So like that got me to thinking, okay, how do we actually like predict and anticipate this kind of stuff? Because there are things with cash flow that you can understand and solve for if you like just understand the product that you're selling. Like to give an example, I was selling these like HVAC vacuum pumps, and they're a very specialized item. I was getting them for a great price, selling them for $700 or $800, buying them for like 350, 400. But I knew from the get-go that that would not be a high volume item, right? There are only so many people that need like a $800 vacuum pump that they can really only use like a residential AC unit, right? And so like those are predictable. Things like this are not predictable. So that'll get us into the second one. And this gets a little bit more interesting. I only really feel comfortable sharing like a subset of the information. But what I'll tell you this is if you understand and think about how these big retailers actually move their inventory, you can unwind that and reverse that behavior and use that to anticipate and track what they're going to do. To give you an example, A number of big retailers before, they're about to roll out a big deal or they're going to launch a successor product to something in their line, they will actually move all their inventory from like their center node to the edge nodes, and you'll suddenly see spikes in like stores that are like closer to the edge consumers. They're not big stores, they're not central stores, they're not central to any kind of major railway or shipping, but like you understand what they're going to do. They're stocking up their store so they can roll out a sale. And this is just a example here that you can see. This is from a very small retailer where you can't really determine too much. But when you start seeing spikes and you're seeing spikes of inventory in kind of odd increments, you can predict and understand what people are going to do. Um, so that's kind of level two, is how do you start getting ahead of these things? And especially for large purchases, I was doing some of that analytic and trying to understand how do we predict and anticipate these issues. So the third one was, this is a just for fun company, and like I've made a lot of these just for fun companies, but this was starting to consume like 15, almost 20 hours a week, meaning like 10 hours each day, Saturday, Sunday. Like so my weekends were shot. And like you can say that that's a good thing. But in reality, I was doing this for fun. I wasn't really doing this for money. And so I was trying to think about, hey, what are the things that are taking the most time out of my day? And some of these are as simple as I need to be able to get and create these very professional listings that I can then post and advertise on multiple platforms, whether that's on Shopify, that's on eBay, that's even just like sending it out to the people who normally buy from me. I'm probably not going to go too deep into it because I actually made a YouTube video kind of documenting how this was built. Um, if you want to be like the 22nd or 23rd subscriber for my YouTube channel, Open Ontology, and the code is on my organization GitHub, so Silky Tools. All right, let's keep going. I built a couple other things on top of this. Like, so for example, when I was originally thinking about what kind of tooling I wanted to manage this business, one of those was something like QuickBooks, right? Where QuickBooks is like an accounting software. You can take in receipts, and you can do other things with it. And what I realized was like QuickBooks' receipt functionality was not good. Like you had to take a receipt, put your camera over it, like focus it just right, and then it would fill in like 30% of the fields, and you have to fill in the rest. It was a pain. And so I built some additional things that I don't think we're gonna have time to go in here, but really what those were doing is you would take a picture. I would just like shoot it off. I like the way I like to do it. I just send it to an email box that I have, and I trained a listener. Again, this is all within Foundry as well. It would just take that, run a combination of like an LLM Vision and OCR API on top of it, extract the information, and basically store all of the input receipt data. And then periodically, I take like a credit card receipt, it combine the two, marry them, and you have a pretty good understanding of what you're doing from like an accounting perspective. And this was all, again, free. This is all built on a developer tier, just to be clear as well. And so all of that was possible. And so I think you're seeing this from start to finish. A very simple, lightweight ERP is possible natively within Foundry. But if you remember one of the first slides that I had here, it was like 75% of the demand was word of mouth. And the way that this was working is I would have a couple of guys who I would sell to on a very regular basis. Like they would have a crew out on like a fracking rig or something like that, or they're like laying pipe and something like that. And like if something broke while they're doing that, like they needed that tool that day and they were willing to pay for it. They were buying in bulk for like over 100 people. And so they would go through 7, 8 high torque impact wrenches in a week, right? Like that was pretty normal. And they'd go warranty them whenever they felt like it. But like getting the job done was very important to them. And a lot of times they didn't actually even have internet reception like where they were out. So a lot of times they would just call me up. And so um, I was kind of saying, okay, this is kind of cool if I think about it from a UI user experience perspective, what I already had was kind of cool. It was helpful. It was very valuable to me personally. And it was a good user experience compared to the world of enterprise applications. It's not what I would consider a great consumer user experience. And so as I was going through that and saying, okay, what is a very good consumer experience? There's a couple aspects to that. The first is how do you actually interact with the tool? I think Connor mentioned this during his speech, but um, a keyboard or even a computer in general is not a great medium to interact and express what you want to say and do. And so, yeah, a keyboard's better than a mouse, right? Your voice is better than a keyboard. But what's even better than that is something where you don't have to like say what you're thinking or doing again. It is picking up from context clues and like I'll say like uh, inferring or telling you what you should be doing or taking action on your behalf proactively. So that's the first part. Is like what is the way that I want to work with and experience this tool? The second, I'm going to call this focus on fun. If I was trying to sell this to an investor, it'd be like have people spend their time on value added work. But I like focus on fun a little bit more. So what are the things that I like to do, right? It's talking about tools. It's saving customers and my friends money. The third one's a personal one where like it's very gratifying to be able to say, yeah, me as a person who had had no direct like ties to any distributors of tools, no brand partnerships, was able to be successful in like an extremely competitive uh, industry. So what is not fun, right? Forms, paperwork, having to enter things into a system, and that's what I was having to do before, where someone would call me, I would take notes, or they'd take a screenshot of a like a hand scribbled notepad and say, "Hey, this is what I want to go buy. Create me the order." And obviously, no one likes to dos or sitting in meetings. So that's where we get into I'll say the next iteration of this solution is. Okay, and just to give you a little bit of context, I am taking all of this data, like marrying up this data. So like I said, we're getting data from like eBay, Shopify, and then a huge portion is just like word of mouth orders. And so the way that that was coming in, I would effectively ingest all that data from like a Shopify instance. This is just a select set pertaining to like item master related entities. But it would take that in and normalize it, store it in what I'm calling a product inventory object. And so that was kind of like the status quo. And you can see like, yeah, this works. I can look at each of the orders and manage them directly here. I can see customer information, all of that good stuff. But if I think about what is kind of like that next stage of user experience, um, that's where I am branding this Odessa. And there's no really good meaning to it. You can see this is kind of a joke. We're always listening. In truth, the name came from there's an SNL skit that I really liked. Some people have clearly seen it, where I think it's called Amazon Echo for senior citizens. And in that, like the person was calling Alexa all different names, like Allegra or like all these things. And one of them was Odessa. And for whatever reason, that stuck. And so this is a little bit of a play on that, but really you can kind of understand like the intention, which is like as you're talking, what's going to be happening is this is using 11 labs to transcribe whatever you're saying, and as you're speaking, it's going to take notes. When you get to a certain like what I'll call critical mass of information, it'll start to actually compile notes and summaries and do all this cool stuff. And well, I'll say all this cool stuff. That's kind of like the status quo, right? Because there are other tools, Copilot being one, that do similar activities, but really where there's a differentiation is Copilot is it's a passive solution. And when I say it's a passive solution, it listens to you, it will like transcribe everything you did, and it will even sometimes summarize it correctly. But what it doesn't do for you is it doesn't actually like suggest things for you. And a huge one for me that I experience on a daily basis is I'll be on a call in which we're saying, hey, we're going to go work with this client in this industry. And someone will be like, oh, I wonder who the CTO is of that. Um, that's a very non-ergonomic process to go have to stop, lose focus from that meeting, lose like your momentum and go research that. And so like I've built in all these like little shortcuts where like if you press F, it's gonna go take some of the information and go try to reference it against like a global set of sources. Some of them are pulling in from like just open web searches. Some of them are pulling in like from different solutions. I don't know if this is going to work right now because it's not classified as one of these types of calls that I'm supporting. But this is kind of like we'll say this like the status quo. Like this is cool. It's helpful. It's able to be useful. But like really where it comes into its own is when you're trying to combine it with like a specific targeted use case where you're able to register tools, AIs that have very targeted scope and behavior. And let me clear this so I can actually run it through. And so what I did for this was I took a real conversation. I took like the SST transcript from 11 labs, and then I like removed all the swear words, condensed things down, and that's what I'm gonna play through here directly for you. So what you're gonna see here is in the right-hand side, there's something called working memory. And so if you think about it, right, as you have a natural flow of a conversation, you'll be talking, you'll be interacting with someone, and someone will mention something. Well, I don't want to have to repeat what I say. I don't want to specifically prompt for anything. And so what I've configured is it will take a certain boundary of context and use that as a reference point to like populate its context memory that you can then perform actions on. And if you had noticed, right, in the top right hand corner, that just flipped to sales call. The reason it flipped to sales call is it realized the content of the conversation and it found the relevant information. And this time pressing Control F actually did something. Ooh. Um, and if you can see in the bottom right here, what I did was I just said press F and it said, hey, there's an Adrian. I really don't have a ton of clients named Adrian. And so it actually found the right one. And what's useful here is as this conversation's happening, as they're just talking to me, I'm able to focus on like what I'll say is the differentiation, which is providing a differentiated customer experience, connecting to and talking to the human, taking notes or kind of half paying attention so you can scribble something down to make sure you don't miss it is not something humans are good at, and it's not something you should be doing. And here's actually another kind of cool piece here as well is I've structured the solution to try to classify a lot of different things as actions so it doesn't miss anything. But what happens is there's kind of a lot of noise within here. And so I'm pressing something called grooming the actions. And what that's actually going to do is um, Connor and Dorian's presentation on Larry, what that's using behind the scenes is something called X-Reason. It's a framework for deterministically or semi-deterministically loading in the appropriate tools to answer a specific problem. In this case, right, it knows who the customer is. It knows kind of what products they're referring to, even though if you look at like what they actually said here, a lot of these are like shorthand. Like it's a good one. Do you have some of those stubby impact wrenches, right? Like that means nothing unless you understand, hey, this is the customer. This customer typically only buys from one certain brand. And stubby is like a term that people typically use for like the 3/8 stubby impact wrench from Milwaukee. So you can see what it's done, right? It's registered the correct tools to go get the context from Foundry. So it's found the customer, it's created an order, it's created the order lines, and then if I'm good with this, what I'll just do is press execute. Okay. And so what that'll actually do is it'll sync that back into Foundry, and then if I want to go look at it afterwards, I can. There's another option as well, right? Where let's say that there's another one which is follow up on order status. Cool. Maybe I don't actually want to create an order for that, but I do want to categorize and save the to do, right? And so that's what you're seeing here. And same for like the notes and summaries. And then in future conversations, if I press F or try to search, it'll then go reference against that past conversation. Like, hey, Adrian, how is that other impact wrench that I sold you last week? How's that holding up for you? I'm not going to necessarily remember that, especially with a large number of customers, but you can start to have these, well, say, improved user experience conversations by leveraging AI to effectively pull in and use information like this. So I have exactly 48 seconds before I think the 5-minute mark. So I'll pause right here. Questions, please.